like to share with you today a little bit about the power of the Sacrament of Reconciliation. You might be a little nervous at the idea of going to confession. Maybe it's been some time for you. I can tell you I've also had some experience with that myself. I still remember when I was a child, we were having a reconciliation service in my Catholic school. So there were many priests there. They did a short prayer at the beginning, and then we divided into different places to go and make our confessions. So I went to one priest who had been leading the prayer service and started my confession. Then suddenly, one sister ran into the room and tried to tell the father in a calm way, "Father, your microphone is still on." So then I realized as I was confessing, Father's microphone was still projecting to the entire church. That was not my favorite experience of confession. But thanks be to God, He gave me the grace to return after some time to this powerful sacrament of reconciliation. It is in this sacrament that we experience the love of God. Saint Therese of Lisieux says, "Even if my sins were as crimson, I would still trust in God's mercy and His love." Pope Francis is a powerful example of the power of confession in our world today. He tells us over and over, do not be afraid to go to confession where you will meet the God of love. He himself goes to confession every 15 days because, as he says over and over to us, even the Pope is a sinner in need of God's mercy and forgiveness. You might think you don't need to go to confession too often. I know it's difficult to prepare yourself to go. But Padre Pio writes that even if you leave a room clean and unoccupied for a week, even then dust still accumulates over time. It's that way in our life as well, especially as we live in our modern world, surrounded by so much technology, so many distractions and all of the frustrations and anxieties of life. Even when we try to live the best life that we can, still the dust accumulates. We fall into temptations when we least expect it, and then we know we are in need of God's mercy. I invite you to really consider the power of this sacrament to bring us into union with God once again. When I first entered religious life, one of the stages in our formation, you make a complete confession of your whole life. I must tell you, if you think it's difficult to confess 1 or 2 weeks or 1 month of sins, it's more challenging when you try to sit down and write your entire life and all of the faults that you've fallen into over time. But God gave me a great blessing in that experience. It was very difficult. I was afraid to go and confess everything. But through the priest, I was able to receive so much good advice and inspiration. And I understood at that moment that my life was a story of God's mercy. Up until that point, I had a divided image of myself. I thought of myself on one hand as the good person who was trying to live a good life and have a relationship with God. And on the other hand, I saw myself as a sinner, falling over and over into different temptations. In that confession, I learned that these two images were really one person, that God saw me as a single human being, that He loved me very much in all of my attempts to love Him and my failures to live life as I thought I should. And in that moment, when the priest gave me absolution, I truly felt God's love touching my heart, transforming me in a new way. So as you prepare to go to confession, I invite you to take some time in silence just to reflect on your life. See where it is that you were trying to love God and where you struggled. I get very nervous when I go to speak in front of other people, so I even write down my sins on a piece of paper, and you go and make your confession, and then there's a nice kind of satisfaction afterward when you can tear up that paper, or if you desire, even burn it, to see that all of your sins are cast into the depths of the sea, to be remembered no more. And tell yourself that it is truly Jesus Christ who is speaking to you in the sacrament of reconciliation, that in the words of the priest, Jesus is giving you a unique message to help you to live your life, to draw closer to Him. The saints would go to confession more and more often as they grew in holiness, because they realized the power that was present in that sacrament. And as you get the graces of confession, you can draw closer to God. St. Teresa of Avila explains that the door to prayer cannot be entered fully until we free ourselves from the sins that bind us to the world. It is only in that forgiveness and absolution that we can open ourselves to the love and mercy of God and experience that union with Him in our prayer life. So in confession, you get such a deep experience of freedom, of forgiveness. And even if you struggle with habitual sins, I know I've been in that position too. Sometimes it feels like you confess the same sin over and over again. But if you confess often enough and have that desire to change in your heart, God will give you the grace. Maybe not in a spectacular way, but slowly, over time, you'll find yourself puzzled to discover that sin doesn't catch you anymore. God is helping you to overcome what seemed impossible to overcome before. There is a great power there, as Jesus appeared in the upper room and breathed His Spirit into the first apostles. That same Spirit is alive and active in the sacrament of reconciliation. Open your heart today to God's mercy. Go and open your sins to Him, confess everything, and receive His message of mercy, love, and forgiveness. And you'll find yourself embraced by the love of an Abba Father who desires that not one of His little children be lost.